everyone, and welcome to Let's Heal with Beth Jones. That's me, your host. My mission is to bring the power of healing to trauma and abuse survivors. That's why every guest on this show will bring you an amazing story of healing in action. So come on, everyone, let's heal. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. Of course, that's me. I am your host, and I am delighted for today's conversation. I have with me someone who is a longtime colleague of mine, and through that process became my friend. So it's a pleasure to welcome you today. Scott Foster, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Beth. Thank you very much for asking me to be part of the podcast for empowering survivors. I think this is an important conversation, and so I'm delighted to be here.
This is an important conversation that we're going to have today. And I think you know a little bit about my passion, particularly for men sharing their stories and their healing journeys. So I am very grateful that you agreed to come on and have a chat with me today. We're going to have some fun with it.
Sounds great.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we get started first by you introducing yourself and letting our folks who are listening to or watching this know who you are.
Sure, happy to do. I think it's probably worthwhile to note that I'm a gay professional living in Washington, D.C. I've had 3 different careers, if you would. I was a teacher, I was a lawyer, and for the past 20 years, I've been a consultant. And so in those 3 capacities, it seems like I bring a lot of facets of living together. So,
yes, absolutely. 3
very distinct careers, but interestingly enough, the consultant career right now brings in both the teaching aspect as well as the lawyering, along with the consultation of electronic discovery that I work in.
Yeah, and it definitely does. So let's talk for just a minute about how we know each other, because maybe the longer part of your career, the 20 years, maybe it's the longest part, I'm guessing.
It is.
Yeah, and that's how we know each other. So we met, I don't even know how many years ago, both at FTI. You're still there, although you're just about done, which is
I am soon to be retiring.
So exciting. I'm so happy for you, and congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
Great achievement. But that is the company that we were both working for where we met. I don't remember how long ago it was we met. It was a very long time ago. But the really cool thing about our time together at FTI was that crazy case that we worked on, which was the last major case that I worked on before I left Hong Kong and then left the firm almost a year ago now that I've been gone. That was a very interesting case to live through.
And a long time too, that case lasted. So it wasn't one of those fly-by-night cases. It's definitely a very involved case that took the expertise of quite a few individuals to bring together the solution that we were able to implement for this case. So it was fire and brimstone at some point.
I'm glad you said that, fire and brimstone. Yeah, which it's the kind of testing that you probably should be getting early on in your career so that you know what to expect, what might be coming. Although I do have to say that I don't know that I could have handled that case earlier in my career, because it is the career defining case for me. And that has nothing to do with the duration or the size of the project. It really has to do with all of the I have literally never seen this before firsts that we dealt with on that case.
And it was very complex. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, very complex subject matter and a very serious subject matter. So it's not something I've talked too much about on this show, but what I used to do before I became the healing mentor and started my work with empowered survivors. But I used to be a forensic accountant, and I used to do complex fraud and white-collar crime investigations on behalf of companies that were responding to inquiries from various government authorities around the world, which is the same work that you did or do. You're about to be a did, but you do now.
That's right. But through that process of going through these large projects, one of the good things about it is, as you say, the relationships that you were able to make with your colleagues who you end up trusting that they're going to be able to carry their weight on this particular matter, and their expertise is going to shine as well. And it's those relationships, like today we're having this conversation because I so appreciate you as a friend as well. And that's been something that's been growing and growing over the past several years.
Yeah, through some tough times we went through together. That case was no joke. There were some really hard things that we had to get through on that case. And like I said, first, you can't make this stuff up firsts that we had to get through that tested all of us from time to time. But I think through that, you're right, we forged a relationship that transcends the professional and really based on trust to where we're friends now, which is wonderful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sad that those days are behind me, I have to tell you. And I bet in not too long, you're going to say the same thing to me. You were right.
Yeah. As I'm looking at retirement, one of the things I am looking forward to is separating myself from my telephone a little bit. It's constantly ringing, and so it'd be nice to get a little bit of a respite from that for a while.
Yeah, you are going to enjoy that for sure, I can tell you. And what's really great about being on the other side is that you can decide when you want to answer it and when you want to respond, which was not the world we lived in before.
Oh, that's something I'm going to have to learn.
You'll get there. Don't worry. It takes a little bit of time, but you will get there.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we talk about healing on this show. That's what our primary focus is. And we are going to weave that into our conversation today and about what your journey has been like being a gay man through all the different professions you've been through, the different relationships that you've had outside of your relationship with your partner. So your family relationships, your relationships with your friends, you've been all over the world. So you have that viewpoint on it as well. And so we're going to explore some of that as we're talking today about just what that journey has been like for you. Why don't we start from the beginning? Why don't we start with your family?
That sounds great. I'm a product of a mixed marriage. My mother was Japanese, and my father was a good old Texan from the West Texas area, if you will. I am the second of two boys. My brother is just a year older than me. And so for most of our childhood, I think that we were reared almost as twins, if you will. He's very different than me. He's not gay. He's straight and has two lovely children as well. But through our constant moving around that you were talking about, moving around not only in my adult life, but also as a child, I moved around quite a bit. And what you learn is that your immediate family becomes your entire social system. So I've learned to really depend on my parents and my brother as well. And so we are a very close, tight-knit family. And while my mother and father are no longer with me, I still retain that very close bond with my brother, talk with him probably every other day. And so we're very close in that regard.
That's
Yes.
wonderful. That is really wonderful. And you're blessed to have that. My relationship with my family has been a little more challenging and a little more difficult, something that I work on every single day now. And it's been a huge part of my healing journey, being able to come back to have a relationship with my parents and with my sister. So I'm very happy for you. That's been your journey with your family.
But it hasn't always been an easy journey, I have to say.
Yeah.
Coming from a being a gay person or a gay man, having to tell my parents that at some point in my life that I was gay and I wasn't necessarily going to be providing them grandchildren as they would like wasn't exactly the most well-received piece of information.
So which was harder, the fact that you were a gay man or that you weren't going to be having grandchildren? And you could adopt, but you weren't going to be having grandchildren in the traditional way that they might have been looking for, which was more difficult to talk to them about.
Oh, definitely the fact that I was gay and whether I was having children or not, as you say, I could adopt. But back then, I'm old enough to have gone through a time when being gay was considered a mental disease, if you will, a psychotic disorder, where it's much more accepted today than it was ever back then in the late 70s and early 80s, especially in light of the early 80s when we were having the AIDS crisis and things of that nature. Being gay was not exactly the best piece of news my mother and father would like to hear.
So is that around the time when you told them?
Yeah, shortly, it was like right before the AIDS crisis. I think I came out to my parents when I was about probably about 18, 19 years old. So that would have been right around 1980, and the AIDS crisis started happening in 81.
Yeah. So did you experience that? Like, I'm going to use the word, and I hate to use pushback. Let me use that word. Did you experience that, or people maybe even trying to alienate you when you first came out?
You definitely experience it. One, you experience it because you saw many of your friends all of a sudden no longer being around. I remember certain personal friends, very close ones, that either I work with or I knew in social circles, all of a sudden young men came down with AIDS and then ultimately passed on because there wasn't medication to be able to save their lives as there is currently today. And yeah, we saw that. And because of that, you did see discrimination. You saw all around you that AIDS, like being gay, what they used to say, got AIDS yet. So that was that type of discrimination that you routinely saw early in the 80s. And we saw that whole AIDS quilt was to bring exposure and bring awareness about what was happening in our community, that this HIV shouldn't be considered a quote gay disease, but
Mhm.
indeed it was being characterized as that.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that back then was just
Mhm.
the ignorance about it, right? Which is where so much discrimination comes from, anyhow. People just not
Oh
having
yeah.
an understanding of another human being is really where that's coming from. I'm sorry that you experienced that with people who you knew that either discriminated against you or people who passed on. It must have been a very difficult time.
It was difficult. And I remember when I first came out, again, about 1979, the attitude then was a little much more free in
Hmm.
having sex here and there. But as soon as the AIDS crisis came in, that freedom all of a sudden came to a real sudden close.
Yeah.
That you weren't going out and quote playing as much as you one might have a year or two before, because that was obviously very dangerous nowadays because we
Hmm.
didn't know what was happening in the society at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. It must have been a difficult time. So, how did your parents take all of that, given the environment at the time? And then, oh, and I guess your brother as well, the environment, but you coming out
Yeah.
and telling them that you were gay, how did they respond to that?
Not well. I first told my father, and he wanted me to keep it away from my mother and not tell her for many years. And the subject was put into, to use a lack of a better word, put in the closet and shuttered away. And then when my mother did find out a couple, 3 years later, being the Japanese person that she it was a little bit of a black mark on the family because family in Japanese tradition and culture is very strong. And she begged me, pleaded with me to change my ways and become straight. I even tried that for a little while, and I was found myself to be very distraught. Oh, this just doesn't feel right. It's not who I am. She went even to the extent of threatening to commit suicide if I wouldn't change my ways, things of that nature, as an extreme measure. Very
Goodness.
tiger mom type of situation. But then
Yeah.
again, she knew that I was a people pleaser and particularly very close relationship with my mother. In fact, we had two parents. My brother was more aligned with my father, and I was more close to my mother, if you will. And so having to hear that message that she wasn't going to be supportive of me, my partners, was very hurtful. And
Yeah.
we went through very just trials and tribulations of how our relationship and how we navigated that. But the easiest one, interestingly, was my brother, who's so easygoing. He just said, I love you just the way you are. And of course, I'll accept you any way that you want. If you want to be purple, fine. I love you still the same. He was
Yeah.
very welcoming in that regard. So,
Yeah, my sister is a gay woman, and when she told me that she was gay, my very first question to her, I was like, "Are you happy?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "That's all I care about." I'm and have been very supportive of her. It's
I think my parents were more concerned about what would the neighbors think or what would the rest
yeah,
of the family think. They were
yeah,
thinking about how their image might be. It's okay. I don't think they were really thinking about whether or not I would have children. But in addition to that, I know that they were generally concerned about me and my welfare, especially as I was going into a professional teaching career. Oh, maybe that this is not the best move, that you might be influencing children and things of that nature. And so they were very cautious about that. They were also worried about how I would be treated in society.
mm,
And I know that their concern was from love, but the way that it was executed was not exactly the best. We ended up literally just trying to put that conversation away for 10 years. And so we
mm.
ended up talking about the weather for 10 years until I
Oh,
finally put my foot down and said, no, if you want to get to know me, we're going to have some more substantive conversations about what's important to me, my partner, what I'm doing in my life, things of that nature. And that's when the conversation turned a little bit from being very superficial to be a little bit more substantive. They still were not pleased in the fact that I was gay, and at some point they even shunned my then partner and said, "No, we don't want to see him." Okay, that means I don't have to come home then. I
Yeah.
won't be home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
not willing to accept me 100% the way I am, and you just want to talk about the weather, you want to talk about things that are comfortable for you, then that's not an environment that I choose to be in.
My journey with my parents took me to a place where I had no relationship with them for over 10 years. And it was my choice. And I talk about this a lot. I've written about it, putting them in exile with what is actually called the parentectomy. So there's a term out there for it when people do that. So I wasn't the first. And when I learned I wasn't the first, I was very happy about that because I was like, oh, okay, this is like a thing, right? People do this out of survival. And through my healing journey, I have had an opportunity to reconnect with him and to try to reclaim that relationship. And in fact, it's one of the main reasons why I moved back from Hong Kong at the end of 2021 was to really be able to work on my relationship with my parents and my sister. And we're now 3.5 years into that. And I am in a place right now where I'm struggling with the notion of the fact that most of my conversation with my parents are what I call news, weather, and sports, which
Mm.
I don't do too well with because I'm a person of depth and I need to have deep, connective conversations, substantive conversations with people who I spend time with. And I'm struggling with that right now because I'm not getting that from my parents. And it's funny when you said that about talking about the weather, because like literally, I've been saying this whole news, weather, and sports thing came up in the dating world for me about a year ago. I recognized this, that this was a problem for me in connecting with men. If that's what we were going to be talking about, you're probably not my person. And even from a first date standpoint, it's just because of who I am. And I was having a conversation with my dad, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. And literally, we talked about the Masters and who had won the Masters. And then we talked about pine needles that were all over the yard and all over their house from all the storms that they'd been having. And they were collecting rain and water. And then I'm fairly certain we had some conversation about something about either the economy or immigration came up. And I got off that call and I was like, we literally just talked about news, weather, and sports. And that was it. And so I get what you're saying about that deeper connection, right? And feeling like your family is the place that you should be able to go and have that conversation. But one of the other things that I've really been working on for myself and in how I work with other people and what I share with other people is this notion of expectation. And when you have an expectation of people, including those who are assigned to you at birth, your parents and your siblings, you have an expectation of them that they can't meet. If that's causing you pain and suffering, that's really probably about your expectation of what they're actually capable of doing. There's a mismatch. You're not aligned. And I've just been struggling with it. It's a very real thing that I'm living through now. So just when you said that about weather, I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. But it also sounds you have an expectation of your parents that they were capable of meeting because you always felt, as you were saying, that their reaction, even though it might have been off a little bit in the way that they reacted and the way they dealt with it, it still came from a place of love. And I know my parents do love me, but it's just like this giant elephant in the room that we're still struggling to address. So I admire you for having been able to navigate that and move forward in that.
Well, part of that navigation was actually making the ask, if you will,
Yeah.
and putting it to them and saying, I want to be able to talk about something other than the weather. I want to talk about things that are more important for me. And I remember having this conversation with my father and saying, you've known that I've been gay for 10 years.
Hmm.
Have you done any research to try and understand my world? I want to share this with you, but
Yeah.
I think I understand your world. I grew up in it, but I don't think you quite understand my world, and I'd like for you to. And to be able to accept something that is different, I don't think that's out of your sphere of understanding because, my goodness, You married into a multicultural relationship with my mother, who's Japanese. And mind you, it wasn't but 15 years after World War II
Yeah.
when your family itself was a little bit discriminating about having a Japanese woman enter into their family. How did you overcome that? They had to meet mom and realize how wonderful a person she is. You
Yeah.
too have to do the same thing and meet my partner and realize how wonderful that person is and how important they are. But it was making that ask finally to say, no, we need to go to some other place. And if you can't accept that, then I don't have to come home for Thanksgiving. And that's exactly what happened. And so some time went by. Now, it wasn't 10 years like in your case. But it was months.
Mm.
It was months of, I'm not talking with you, I'm not calling, but it was me saying, okay, this is where the line is. Something's going to have to give. And I think I've been giving for the last 10 years of trying to live it in your world, and you've done nothing to try and bring the line closer to my side of the world. So there's got to be some overlap here.
Yeah. It's such
And
great advice, and advice I need to hear right now. So thank you. Because it is something I've been thinking about, like, how am I going to shift? Because I've been very dissatisfied with the nature of the conversations and how am I going to shift it? And so when you say just make the ask, it sounds so simple and so easy. And I need to think about what does that
well,
look like?
there's risk in this, Curtis, because
And that's what there is. And how did they respond to that when you made that ask?
it was 6 months of silence and then they came around. But I was willing to risk that if you're not going to be talking about something more deeper than the weather, then that's really not adding much value to my life. Yes, I have an expectation that my parents will be there and they will share in every aspect of my life. And that's maybe it's a misunderstood expectation. That was what I hoped for. And
Yeah.
that's what I wanted. But it wasn't make the ask and immediately say, okay, no, it was conversations. I know that my father, who is probably more sensitive to my issue than my mother, who is much more rigid and very culturally, I guess, just it was much more taboo, I think,
Yeah.
in Japan. So she was much more just rigid is the word about moving the needle a bit my direction. But it was through his conversation and convincing that he said, no, if you want to have a relationship with your son, you better start changing. And I'm sure that's exactly the conversation Dad had.
For your dad. Good for your
Mhm.
dad. I think about the reasons why we have the challenges with people that we have. And in this case, we're talking about our parents. And I know that the reaction that let's just stay really high up and not get down and talk about it, let's just stay up here and act like it's not happening, that is really coming from a place of fear. And I've thought a lot about that, about what it is that my parents fear in having the conversation, in particular, my dad, what he's fearing. So do you feel like that was part of the
Oh, for sure.
reaction
I
that your parents
remember
were having?
back during that time, there was also this whole thing that Clinton brought in, don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah,
Remember, that's the culture that we were growing up in the 1980s and about the entire gay movement. And if in my lifetime, I've seen it go from a psychological disorder to now, look, people are getting married left and right, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the
yeah,
world.
yeah,
Washington, D.C.
yeah,
is about to play host to the World Pride Parade and celebrations in just a couple, 3 weeks.
yeah,
So we've made remarkable progress
yeah,
in the gay
yeah.
community itself to bring awareness to what is equality for all.
Yes, yes, yeah. I feel like the issue I'm dealing with is a little bit different, right? Because
Yeah.
you being a gay man versus me dealing with the reality that I was abused by someone in my family. That's a little bit different of an issue, and I think there's a lot of fallout. It's generational in my
Yeah.
family, and a lot of generations have suffered in various ways, including my generation. Me and my sister and her kids are in this roll down effect of it, and so I know that part
You
of
have a bigger trusting aspect to your challenges, right?
yeah, and I think there's a fear of, which I think is a natural fear, but one that is a little bit misplaced, of having maybe done something different to stop what I experienced within the family, right? And so I think that's part of where the fear comes from. But it's still it really is very hard to navigate within the family, because I feel very desperate for the connection, deeper connection with my dad in particular, with both my parents, but my dad in particular. And it's just really something that's hard to achieve right now. And I feel like I do need to make an ask.
So if you make the ask, are you afraid that the response will be, I can't meet that challenge?
Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm afraid of. Yeah. Yeah. So I probably need to deal with that myself, right? My own fear of that and just figure out how I'm going to do it. So it's just funny we're having this conversation because this is literally actively something that I'm dealing with right now, which of course, you know enough about what I've been through in the last few years, right? That I see everything that I've been going through my entire life now that I'm much more aware of it in the last 5 years. Everything for me is about the journey that I'm on, right? And the journey with the relationships. So I think it's true about any relationship if you take yourself out of it and stop to think about what you've been through with someone, right? And so I know this is just an evolution of that journey and figuring out really, I suppose I'm really trying to figure out how do I show up in love for my parents despite this challenge that I'm having where I feel like I'm not really engaging with them the way that I would like to be engaging. So yeah, something
I think ultimately it comes down to a compromise as to what would be their ask, right? And what is your ask?
Great question.
So how do we find something that's going to be mutually satisfying for each of us?
That's a great question. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, mutually satisfying. So it doesn't come across as a sort of a demand thing, but rather let's find the common ground on this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there were certain things, of course, that I was not going to flaunt in front of my parents because I knew that would not be good for them. But at the same time, they had to compromise a little bit and say, okay, we'll let Scott and his partner share the same bedroom. Okay. It wasn't always the case, by the way. That took some negotiation, by the way.
Yeah, which that might not even be a gay thing. Some homes if you're not married, you're not sleeping in the same bed with your partner. So
that's so true. That's so true.
Even if you're a male, female, you're still not doing it if you're not married. Which might have been maybe a little bit of the traditional definitely from your mom, maybe from your dad to a certain extent.
That's so true. And at the time we couldn't get married, but now we can. And now I am.
Yes, you are. Yeah, which I know is wonderful for you. It's great. Yeah.
But even I think of discrimination, we were talking about family, but we also see that, of course, in the workplace too.
Just about to go there.
Were you?
That's exactly what I was about to ask you. Let's shift and talk about the workplace. So let's do it.
Yeah, I was talking about when I was a teacher, how scared my parents were that I, as a gay man, young in my career, how I would be perceived by students and by other teachers and other parents. Did that impact my career? And interestingly, no, it didn't seem to affect my ability to teach. But at the same time, it was not out. Not that when I walk down the street, people could probably determine, oh, okay, he's a gay man. I'm teaching music. And so that's also a subject that's a little bit more liberal, let's say. And so I'm sure that all my high school students knew that I was gay, but it was not something that we talked about. I didn't find it too limiting for me in that teaching scenario, but I certainly did find it limiting when I moved to a law firm after going to law school and then graduated and went to law school. Graduated and went to a firm. I felt there was definitely a good old boys mentality, if you would, and a gay man did not fit in the good old boys mentality. There was this kind of glass ceiling, if you will, that said, you can't go, you can't be part of our club. And 10 years after working in that law firm, essentially, I got a knock on the door from FTI that says, would you like to come join our organization? And the first thing I looked at was, is there going to be a glass ceiling? In my interview, they could see on my resume that I was a member of the Gay Men's Chorus and things of that nature. So it was not hidden. And I asked them point blank, this is going back to the ask. I am a gay man. Is that going to be an impediment to my ability to succeed here at this organization? And the person responded, no, it would not be an impediment. We're a very accepting organization. And for the past 20 years, I've found that to be exactly the case. A very accepting organization that did appreciate diversity. And while I know we have a different culture these days, recently it's shifting. I think that our organization still holds to that belief, and it hasn't hurt me. I've been able to climb the ranks to being ultimately a senior managing director at FTI.
Yeah, that's been my experience at FTI too, that the notion of
Mhm.
diversity was something that was believed and practiced. And I mean, everybody's shifting around with how they're talking about DEI right now out in the public. But I think at the core inside of the organization, the people who are there, they know it's the right thing to do, to accept people who are themselves every day at work, not pretending to be somebody who they're not.
That's
So,
true. And while corporations, they are indeed trying to enable people to come to work and be their authentic self, I still understand the challenge that
yeah,
if an individual does want to be their authentic self at work, that it's not just work that all of a sudden they're out to. They're out now all of a sudden to their friends, their Facebook community, their parents. All of a sudden becomes a huge challenge as opposed to just being out to your inner circle of friends.
yeah,
So I understand that challenge, but I'm hoping that people will recognize that being different is empowering. We are talking about our team earlier, that we came and we were stronger because we were different from coming from different backgrounds. And I'm
yeah.
hoping that other people will find the same in their work community as well.
Yeah, it really, I mean, it really is true. That's what makes the world such a great thing. And when you get down to the teaming aspect of it in the professional environment, it's the diversity of thought that comes with each of us being a unique human being that makes teams great. And there's no doubt about that. Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to be on a team with 10 of me. We all think the same way, and we don't want that. I'm
Right.
missing, if I've got 10 of me, I'm missing 90% of what I could have because I've already got me. So let me go get the 90% in those 10 people. So, and I do think organizations have made a lot of progress. It's interesting your experience started in a law firm because we've seen more recently, particularly as the DEI agendas were being pushed in the last 10, 15 years, law firms really grabbed onto those. And maybe that's because law firms had some work to do. And you might have a direct experience to be able to say that they had some work to do. Right? And now they got really out there in recent years with what they were doing. And now, of course, that's become a challenge that they're having to fight with what's happening with DEI, just the whole focus on DEI today. So it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're right. My view of the law firm was, of course, 20 plus years ago when I actually was working in one. And that was a very different time than it is today, when between then and now, gay marriage has become the law of the land.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping it stays that way.
Yeah. Could be facing some challenges there, but you never know what's coming.
That's right. That's
It's an
right.
interesting time we live in. That's all I'm going to say about that. It's a very interesting time that we live in.
That
So,
is so true. That is
yeah.
so true.
Yeah, yeah. So it's good though, being able to, for you personally, being to transition in your career. So I'm guessing you were probably, how long did you teach?
I taught for 7 years. Mhm.
So 17 years into your career, then moving over to FTI, it took you that long to find a place where you felt, I guess, would you say that when you went to FTI, you felt accepted for who you are?
Yes, I absolutely did.
Was that the
Because I
first
soon
time?
found out.
Was that probably the first time professionally that you felt that way?
Absolutely, because I had colleagues around me who were also gay. And so
Mm,
we were able to have a good relationship. What is it like to be in your office, different office in Chicago or San Francisco or whatever? But we were able to share some community in that regard. And that was really nice. I didn't have that sense of community or belonging in the law firm because I think I was the only gay in the neighborhood,
yeah.
to quote Little Britain there.
Yeah, which probably wasn't true.
Probably wasn't true, but I think there was just some fear of being able to come out. I perhaps took a little bit more of a, it's me and it's my life. And so if you can't handle it, that's your problem type of attitude. But
Yeah,
not everybody can be as tough.
yeah. So do you get opportunities now to mentor younger people?
I do. In fact, I actively mentor two people. I started that mentoring program when I was in Australia. There is a group called Out for Australia where FTI, as a sponsor of that I was able to introduce when I was serving time in the Australian office there as the tech lead there. We partnered with Out for Australia, which is a young professional mentoring whether it's young professionals in finance or law or things of that nature, I was able to, and I continue to, and this is 3-4 years later, that I still have a call with my mentees, even though I'm no longer in Australia and they're no longer in law school. But I'm still helping these individuals now work through their careers. In fact, I have a call with my mentee tonight, and we get together every couple of weeks just to have a conversation about how is it going. And I've watched him navigate his career from law school into a large firm and now trying to do something different. So
That's wonderful. Good for you. I'm happy you're doing that. Yeah, I love that mentoring mentee relationship. And I found that I learn a whole lot. It's definitely two-way mentoring menteeship. I can tell you that for sure, which I really valued the young people's perspective as I've worked with them. And in fact, I've had such great experience. That's why I call myself a healing mentor, because that's what I do. I share my lived experiences with people, but it's a great relationship. So I'm glad you're still doing that.
and like you, I'm getting something out of it too. As the former teacher, I'm learning from my student, and
Yeah.
as the mentor, I'm learning from my mentee as
Yeah.
well.
All the time.
So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm also like we've struck up a friendship. So one
Yes.
of my mentees actually came to visit me from Australia to the United States not too long ago.
Yeah.
So that's really great.
Yeah, I had a conversation this morning with one of the women in Hong Kong who I used to mentor, but now we're friends. The conversation is much more about being friends than
Yeah.
sharing in more of the formal mentor capacity. So it's great. It's wonderful to have them evolve like that.
Yeah, and that connection is just you just keep growing your network, and that's just
Yeah.
really wonderful. It makes we were talking about what gives me courage. It's having that strong support system, whether it's my friends, my family, my mentee, other people who can validate that, yeah, everything's okay. Everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So because we were just nibbling around the DEI, I'm gonna ask you this question. You can answer it any way that you want to, including you can decline to answer. So I'm just curious how you feel about what's happening right now with respect to the DEI programs
I'm
and
really saddened about that,
really the
frankly.
attack on diversity. That's really what it is.
Yeah, I'm really saddened by that because I think there was an awful lot of progress that was being made to bring up equality. And let's think about it. Our society, at least here in the United States, is not on par. It's not equal for everybody. Whether you're a gay man, you happen to be a person of color, or that you have to be old or young, people are not treated equal. And there are reasons for that, but there are reasons that we can overcome. People don't need to be prejudicial. People don't need to be, because you're poor, you can't have that, or because you're rich, you should be entitled to this. And I'd like to see the government be for the people, all the
All
people.
of it.
And
Me
it
too.
doesn't seem to be that way when you are taking strides to remove DEI programs that are trying to help people elevate the entire human experience.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. It disturbs me greatly as well. Of course, having been an advocate within FTI as you were for so many years around trying to advance what the firm was doing from a DEI perspective, it troubles me. It really does. It's a very sad thing to see. And because I agree, we're all human beings and we all should be elevated as human beings.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Same way. So yeah. Thank you for answering that question, by the way. It's often
Sure.
joy of you in this environment, right?
It's a safe environment. I know you.
With me, it's a safe environment, yes. And this is going to air publicly, but I said what I said too. So you and I are aligned on how we feel about it. So yeah,
If nothing else, I have conviction on my beliefs, be it right or wrong.
me too.
I firmly do believe that people should be looking out for each other and trying to be good to one another.
Yes, I agree. Ultimately, I know that the word heal for me ends the acronym HEAL. The L is love for me because ultimately that's what this whole life, the whole human experience is about. And really to be able to have meaningful relationships, you have to love one another, right? No matter
And
what.
and we in the gay community have love is love, right? And so you don't distinguish. You look at the colors of the rainbow flag, or as you
Right?
know, the progress flag. It has all colors, and it doesn't matter what color of the rainbow that you identify with, that everybody's entitled to love.
Yes, everyone is entitled to love equally.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. So if you had to name the biggest challenge that you've had throughout your life at any point in time as a gay man, what would that be?
Biggest challenge, continuing the close relationships with my parents. It wasn't just a one-time conversation, one and done. No, it was through the course of many relationships that I had. I've had four major relationships in my life, one for 5 years, one 7 years, 9 years, and now one that's ongoing for 16 years. And after each relationship, my mother always was thinking, oh, now he's going to change his ways. Now he's going to become straight. And she would go through that cycle. And it was a repetitive cycle of, why are we having this conversation again, Mom? Why are we having to go through the same steps of me having to reassert what I'm willing, our conversation? And the last time she had this conversation again said, okay, we're not doing this. I'll spend Thanksgiving with my brother. You can come to the Thanksgiving. And at that point, I remember this distinctly, 15 years ago, my parents came to my brother's place. We weren't talking at the time because my mother was of her mindset, he's going to change his ways. It's going to make life grand for everybody. No. But it was literally while she was out picking up pecans, my husband went out to pick up pecans with her. First time that they ever met. And it was like all of a sudden the entire thawing of a relationship just came to being. And from that moment forward, she loved Pond from that point forward. And she would call me, and the first thing that she would say is, how is Pond? And to see how that relationship grew from a time when she was threatening to commit suicide because I was gay, to now being very supportive of my husband and realizing how happy he makes me.
Yeah.
So
Amazing transformation. Good for your mom. Yeah, that's amazing.
we got there.
I'm happy for you. I'm really happy. That's a great story. It's a very happy story that you did get there. It's wonderful. And I'm happy you shared that. Thank you for sharing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when it struck me when you were saying that about what your mom must have realized in that moment when he went out there, that there were just two human beings picking up pecans.
That's right.
That's
sharing a commonality.
Yeah.
And they bonded over that. And from that point forward, it was a very different light. And it was great. And mind you, my mother was always one of the most important people, if not the most important person in my life. So having her accept my husband, all the better. So
yeah, wonderful. I'm really happy that happened for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm hoping the same will happen when maybe you need to get out and pick some pecans. I know they have pecans in Duncanville.
Right. Maybe you go out there and help them with those pine needles or something. I don't know. So yeah, we'll get to where we need to be. It's part of the journey and trying to figure out the best way to navigate it. And then of course you get to be our age, and there's wisdom that comes along with the choices that you're making and the path you're walking and what should you do. Whereas I did handle things in a very different way when I was younger. Didn't have as much wisdom as I have now. We'll see what happens. So it's definitely something that we'll keep working on for sure. Yeah.
Ponder the ask.
It's funny because I'm hearing this from various sources. So I feel like somehow finding a way to, I've been working on this, make the ask or shift it somehow is on me to figure out how to do that. Maybe it's going to be as simple as the ask. Right. So we'll see what happens. I am curious about your experience with support groups and whether or not that was something that you engaged with more in terms of and I'm going to use this word because it isn't what you might have gone through, could be considered a mental health issue, but not for the reasons that it was labeled a mental health issue in the very beginning that you were talking about in the 70s and the 80s with gay people coming out and there's something wrong with you. I'm talking it more from the perspective of you being able to heal and using the commonality of shared experiences with people who are like you to help you to be able to deal with whatever challenges it is that you are facing, including perhaps maybe when you were going through those more difficult times with your parents and in particular with your mom. So have you had experiences like that?
Not so much with support groups. Now, that's not to say I did go and have some psychological therapy done when I was going out of a relationship and trying to wrestle with that. But mind you, in the gay community, when I was first coming out, I was in the music school, lots of gay people in the music school at the time, but we were all sharing stories with one another, and we would hear horror stories of somebody being excommunicated from their family, all the way to my mother and father really readily endorsed me, and they thought that was great. They have three other gay brothers or things of that nature. So the gamut was pretty wide from
Yeah.
nothing to everything. But what it enabled me to do is when you're a gay man, you get to craft a little bit of the type of life that you want. You don't come with specific role models. Man, you work outside, you drive the car. Woman, you are inside working on household, you raise the children. We didn't have those distinct role models. And so because of that, we can create our own. Who wants to do the cooking? You're better at it, so you do that. All right, I like doing laundry or whatever. I like taking care of the yard. Fine, you do that. We have the ability to create roles and capitalize on our strengths and weaknesses as well. But
and isn't that a beautiful thing, right? To be able to do that and not having society
tell you what you're supposed to do.
Years of history telling you what role you should play. Yeah. Yes, it's so freeing, so liberating.
It is that you get to be able to write your own recipe, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you did describe when you started talking about that, though, with in the music, the musician friends, colleagues who you were with, had your own ad hoc support group, right? You created it, even though it might not have been something that was formal. You were still forming community of people who were dealing with the same issues, people who were like you, to where you could share your experiences to help each other.
Absolutely. And as that was going through, they were indeed my support network. And everywhere I've gone, most of my friends that I hang around with are indeed identified with the gay community. Not all, but a good portion of them. I would say at least 50% of the people I hang around with are gay men. And so I do have that support group. But you did bring up an interesting thing about therapy that I wanted to touch base on. One of the things that was dealing with a multicultural upbringing, as I did.
Yes.
Japanese mother and an American father. I didn't realize until I was much older, in my 30s, what a different upbringing I had because of a Japanese mother, and the mindset that I was having was more of an Asian mindset of what family comes first, individual comes second. And that really came to fruition a little bit later on with one of my relationships. Like, why are you so selfish? This is better for us. Yeah. It might be better for you to do this. This is better for us. And we both compromise and we do that. But that was the one thing that I had to figure out that really took me by surprise in my journey.
Yeah.
The cultural differences. More so than the gay issue, actually. Yeah,
it sounds like it. Yeah, absolutely. So you have spent some time going through therapy throughout your journey?
I have.
And just dealing with the traditional things that we deal with when we go to therapy.
Yeah, why is this not working?
Yeah, so great, because that's what we do in therapy. That was great the way you said that. Why is this not working? That is generally what we're all solving in therapy.
And interestingly enough, I remember my last session with my therapist. He said, you can boil this down to 3 words: let it go.
Yeah. It can be hard to get there to let it go phase. So yeah, that's actually how I talk about the notion of forgiveness, is letting go. And that's what I've learned, is that the idea of forgiveness is a foreign concept to me. And I don't know that I need to forgive or not forgive. I know I've experienced some things in my life that are not forgivable acts, and I could not forgive those because they're not forgivable. But the idea for me really is about letting go of the emotions that I would carry inside of me that would block my ability to know love and to be able to love people, give and receive love, right? Which is talking about before, right? That's ultimately what we're all trying to do in relationships, is anchor them around love, and what we should be trying to do. But that for me is where I got to through my journey, was just let it go, right? You just get to the point where I could just let go of the emotions that were binding my heart and be free.
And make you happy and be, as you say, capable of loving and being happy. That's what life is about.
Yeah. I asked you about support groups. I think you found community. You have
Yeah.
support groups in your own way. We talked about therapy and certainly trying to communicate with your parents and just to do the work directly to mend some bridges there. What other types of things have you done as you've been going through healing process on your journey? What other types of modalities have you engaged with?
Interestingly enough, one of the things we're talking about the ask, my ask was a letter to my parents and saying, I don't understand why you are acting this way and discriminatory when in fact, I don't think my father raised me to be prejudicial. I grew up and I described our family, multicultural, mother loving, father loving, caretaking. I've always expected that. To see this reaction from you when I tell you that I'm gay is very surprising. And so the modality was, okay, maybe a conversation on the telephone is not the way to do it. Maybe if I just put my thoughts in a letter and then let them stew with that for a little while and see what they think about that. Sometimes it's not a conversation that you want to have, but you want to be able to express yourself fully
Yeah.
and not have them interrupt perhaps your line of thought. I found that to be helpful for me.
Yeah, you see this expression on my face because literally I've also been having the conversation very actively about whether I should write a letter to my parents. It's like God said, you know what? You haven't really had an in-depth conversation with Scott in too long, so let's bring him on the show. Let's record this conversation. You two talking about how you're going to move this forward, right? It's like God said, I'm going to bring him. He's going to tell you exactly what he did, and somebody else is going to be saying that to you. That's so funny. Yeah, the letter. Like, okay, I hear you. Maybe I'm going to write a letter. Yeah, for sure.
You wrote a book, a letter should be simple.
Yeah, yes, it's a different kind of letter, right? It is a different one because this one there's a lot of emotion in the book. The letter would be full of emotions, but I feel like I could do it actually in a healthy way now. So it might be where I start, at least to get it down on paper so I know how I feel, get my own thoughts down on paper, and then I'll decide what I'm going to do with it.
And you can write the letter and script it and manipulate it so it's just right.
Yeah. So tell me today, because you do introduce yourself and you do say that you are a gay man, and I suppose I would hope that at some point in time our society would evolve to where you don't even feel like you need to say that anymore. You're just accepted as a human being and as Scott and who you are, and that it doesn't really matter. And maybe I'm in some utopian world in the future where all of the DEI issues that we've been dealing with over the years are suddenly and magically resolved, or we have none of that out there. We're all just people. But just tell me where you are with that now and how you feel about it. Because there's a need to continue to support while we do have the challenges around gay rights and acceptance and all of that. There's definitely that is still out there. But just tell me how you feel about just about the notion of just being able to say, hey, I'm just Scott.
Oh, I wish it was that simple sometimes, right? That you can just say everybody's going to be accepting of, and this is my partner upon and whatever. But that's not always the case. I've traveled around greatly in the world, and some places are much less accepting. We even have conversation with folks who are in some of the Arabian countries that being gay is just an outlaw. And so we have to think about how do we advance those cultures to maybe be a little bit more accepting. Even in the United States, it's not great. There are certain parts of the country that I just don't feel very safe in, frankly. Certain parts of the city I don't feel safe in because there's still gay bashing going on. There's still people who are out there actively pursuing to hurt somebody just because of their sexual orientation or being discriminatory. So
Yeah.
you're still having to be aware of your surroundings, still look around. Does anybody look displeased by the fact that you're there? Less so down, but there's still a reason for gay bars. It's a safe haven for many gay people. It's not just that they play great music, but there's fewer gay bars than there used to be, and that's a good thing, I think, because we're becoming more accepting in all parts of the community.
Yeah.
But it's not as strong, but there's still a need for a gay bar.
Yeah. I'm going to keep searching for my utopian world.
Yes.
It's interesting. I'm going through it, and I really haven't dealt with this as an issue yet, but in January, I started dating a Black man, and I am fairly certain he's my life partner. And so we've had conversations about this. What's it going to be like? Because I've never had the experience before. He's dated white women a fair amount in his lifetime, but I've never had that experience. But it's weird to me to even be having to have the conversation that somehow, I'm not even going to use that word, but it's just weird to even be having the conversations that this is something that I even need to think about or have an awareness of. But things will happen from time to time that is a reminder that some people do care about it, even though it's not their business at all. And it doesn't change me, it doesn't change him because of the person who we are, the person that we chose to be with. But it still is the reality, I think, as you're saying, of what we're living with and in our society.
There's still ways for people to go to realize that different doesn't necessarily mean bad. It's just different.
It's just different. Yeah, it's just
Right.
different. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness for that, because of what I was saying before. We don't want a world full of 8 billion me's. How boring would that be?
There are movies like that.
We don't need 8 billion Scots. We need our diversity and the differences that we have. So yeah, for sure. Yeah. You are content with where you are in your life today?
I am very content in where I am. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And when I think about the journey as a gay man from 1979 all the way to today, I'm actually proud of the community and how we were able to elevate the experience for the gay culture and the gay community from what it was to what it is today, and all the battles that we've had to fight. Now, often we draw parallels with other movements, be it suffragette or maybe the Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And I think we were able to do so much in a compressed amount of time. Yeah. And to be part of that journey and to be able to wave my proud little gay flag along the way and hopefully be a good ambassador for the community.
Yeah.
That's been really delightful to see and very rewarding. I like where we're going. We're not quite there, but I like the trajectory we're going, and I'd like to see it continue no matter what DEI initiatives are being thwarted today.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you say that you're content, but I also agree with you. We've made some good progress, and hopefully we will continue to make good progress for diversity broadly. And all types of diversity and equity. And I also agree, you've been a wonderful ambassador for the gay community, for sure. Everything that I've seen you do has been wonderful, and I know you'll keep doing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Beth.
Yeah. And it's good to have you back on this side of the world. So
it's nice to be back in the United States. While I loved Australia as well, it was a great place to be. It's not home. And the United States is home, and it's nice to be back with family and friends.
Yeah, I'm happy for you in that regard too. So life is wonderful. You're about to retire. Couldn't get much better, it sounds. Although I do wonder if you're going to get bored in 6 months, what you're going to be doing, but we'll see.
Yes, we'll see. I've got lined up all kinds of pieces of music that I need to learn. So there we go.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And if we have folks who want to connect with you, where will they be able to find you post FTI?
Oh, post FTI, probably just reach out to me on my personal email account. That's fine too. Or through you if they want to connect with you, and you can connect with them with me.
That's up to you, because it can be public. If you want to put your email out there, I'm happy to. I'll drop it in the show notes if you want to. But we can also put your social media links out there where they can get you across social media if they want to connect with you. You never know, there might be somebody who listens to this who wants to connect with you. Somebody who might be looking for some support or advocacy work. So yeah, mentorship, you never know what might be out there.
Very good.
We'll get you connected. All right. Thank you again for being on the show. It's great to see you. Always wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, Beth. Glad to be part of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. It's fun. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you have enjoyed this episode. And as I always tell you, come on, everyone. Let's heal. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at BethJonesHEALingMentor.
And if you'd like to know more about me and my work to help other survivors to heal, please visit me on the web at empoweredsurvivors.com.